I'm here with Pastor Phil Hubbard, lead pastor of C3 Church in London, who became the pastor of the church during the COVID pandemic in 2020. So, Phil, what's your simple answer to this question we're working on today? What on earth is culture?
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Yeah, culture, the definition would be kind of, a set of values, practices, worldviews, that collective. But I would land culture in that culture is people, because
Hmm.
if you're trying to form or reform culture, it's not a list of things on a page, but it's people that you're trying to transform. So I think it's that base nature of people that form culture. So that would be my simple answer.
That's a great answer. And I don't know if I've ever heard anyone actually give it that simply and that succinct before, that culture is around people, which when you think about it, actually does make a lot of sense because there's people that we're involved with, connected with in church. Is that something as a definition that you've kind of thrashed around on yourself? Is it something you've read that you've kind of meditated on and thought about? Is it something that you've just seen in your own pastoring world?
Yeah, look, I think it was something when Lucy and I became pastors, and it was a bit of a whirlwind kind of circumstances into us becoming lead pastors. But I think I'd had a season there to contemplate it, and we've been under some great leaders in the past. But I
Mm.
think I think for me, I started looking at some of when we were becoming and trying to go, okay, well, we're starting, we're taking over a church here, and how do you do culture? What does that look like? And I think for me, you start to write things on a page, but obviously that means nothing
Mm.
unless you're actually grounding that in people change. You can quote your five values and your five culture points till you're blue in the face, but people being transformed, people being changed, that's the only way that culture takes place. It's
Yeah.
not a bulletin board, it's people.
I think that's awesome. That's a great insight. I mean, keep watching the video, but I think that's a great insight you can take away from this interview already. That ultimately, yeah, you're right. You can have your list of your core values, a vision, mission statement. You've got everything plastered on
Yeah.
walls and kind of put all over your socials and everything. But ultimately, it is about what are people carrying, what are people saying, how are people behaving. Now, you and your wife Lucy took on the church, C3 Church London, during the pandemic. Got handballed during the pandemic. Man, that's a big ask and a big
Yeah.
task. And
Yeah.
you kind of relaunched the church in some ways
Mm.
during the pandemic. What sort of specific cultural shifts did you bring into place during that pandemic time and over the last 5 years? What sort of cultural emphasis points have you had in your church?
Yeah, look, and we had a brilliant foundation that was laid by Simon and Valerie McIntyre before us. So, we had a wonderful foundation there, based out of who they were, and then COVID cleared us out essentially. So we did have a blank slate in many ways. My wife Lucy and I coming into the church, we didn't know that at the point that we took over, but very quickly realized that we had a bit of a blank slate, and London cleared out, so church cleared out, and we started again from scratch, really. And I think in that environment, like I was saying, the list on the page doesn't really mean anything, but who you are as a leader and how you are with your key people, key team, that's
Mm,
that's the stuff that translates. And so I think it was the integrity of who we knew we were, the
mm.
values that we'd always tried to live by, to minister from, to lead from. But obviously, we hadn't been pastors for a long time too. So it's just those same values that you are as a friend, as a family member. All of those things should then come through in who you are as a pastor. So, so
Mm.
the baseline was we started doing ministry with some of our best mates. I think when we got asked to become pastors, our first conversation with some of our best friends over here, and hey, do you want to do this with us? Because we knew that baseline of friendship, and that it wasn't just going to be Lucy and I, it was going to be the values of our core team, and those friendships and that DNA that as we grew would then be multiplied kind of across our church. So I think that friendship as a core DNA, those relationships there, healthy family balance, especially in a city like London, and allowing people the space to grow and the space to build healthy, safe, vibrant community in a city like London that can be incredibly transient. So, but I think one of the main things that we lent into was just culturally, and how we've led was just that for a lot of church culture can be very energized by the concept of growth and growing and,
Yep.
and growing and growing a church. So we make decisions based off how do we grow. Whereas though I think for me and Lucy, one of those core revelations for us stepping into leadership was, like Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God brought the growth. He brings it. That's his job. So for us stepping into this in a new tumultuous time is kind of taking a step back and going, actually, growth's not my job. Our
Yeah.
job is the planting of seed and the watering of it. So it's the environment
Yeah.
and the culture that we create. And then if growth happens, that it's his church. So
Yeah.
that was, I think, one of the core foundational pieces for us. Friendship was the DNA, and then just the allowing God to build his church and focusing on culture and environment.
Feeling stuck as a church leader? Growing your church doesn't have to be overwhelming. The Hub gives you step-by-step roadmaps to grow a healthy church in just 20 minutes a day. Join the hundreds of church leaders who found their breakthrough by accessing my 4 decades of ministry experience, which delivers genuine results. Start your free 14-day trial today at growahealthychurch.com/hub. Yeah, I love that, because I think the pressure to grow a church on pastors can really weigh heavily on you. And I think if you have
Yeah,
that understanding, that insight that, hey, our job is to create space for the Holy Spirit to work in people's lives, to people to build friendships and relationships. We've got to plant, we've got to water, we've got to do all the things that will nurture that and position us for growth. And then
yeah,
the X factor is God gives the growth. And if he doesn't, okay, work out what's going on there. And I
yeah,
love that integrity you had between who you are as a person is what you wanted in your leadership, and then therefore in your church, that integrity. So I think, pastor, church leader, watching today, you may be thinking, how do I actually really get strong, healthy culture in our church? Maybe the place to start is looking not only to the Lord, but also looking to yourself. What's important to you? What's
absolutely.
valuable to you? What's vital for you? Because that'll flow organically and easily into your church, rather than looking at the guy down the road and going, well, he's got a great culture, I'm going to pinch some of that and bring that into my church. It's not that easy. But I think if you're building out of, man, we really want strong friendship base, we really want healthy family, so we don't want to be thrashing people into church life. I love that, Phil. I think that's really wise, actually, because I think that sense of integrity between who you are and what you build in your church is
Yeah,
crucial.
and it's we did essentially take over a church, but obviously because of circumstances, we very much felt like we relaunched it. But
Yeah.
there's many pastors out there at the moment who are transitioning churches.
Mm,
They're the next generation pastors, and I think
mm,
taking the pressure off yourself to be what your predecessor was.
yeah.
I think there's one of our core values as a church is that faith is our legacy, and there's a
Mm,
legacy that has come before you, and hopefully that legacy is healthy and strong, and and
yeah.
definitely for us it was. But for me to try and be Simon McIntyre, I'm a completely different personality, and
Yeah.
you have to lean into the integrity of who you are and know who God's called you to be, and celebrate what has gone before you, but to continue to be integrous to you, your gifts, your
Yeah.
personality, and how because you can't lead like anybody else. You can't lead like the guy like down the road. You'll be out of your grace then, and you can't
Yep.
lead by the one that's come before you. So yeah,
I think part of the leadership journey is actually discovering who you are. What has Jesus called you to? What's your context? What's your capacity? And working out who you are, which takes years. I don't think you just arrive at an age and go, wow, I know who I am now. I think it takes experiences, moments, connections with the Lord, connections with people. And actually, one of my hobby horses that I don't like is when people say, hey, your identity is totally in Christ. And I go, yeah, nah. Your identity is in Jesus, but it's also in, where did you grow up? Who's your mum and dad? What's your ethnicity? What experiences developed you? What are your gifts? All these things shape who you are. And I think it's a bit of an over religious spiritualization. Say, oh, your identity is totally in Jesus. Well, no, I think it's a bit more than that. And I think as you discover yourself as a leader, you actually discover your culture as a person. And then you look at, how do I move this into the life of our church?
Absolutely agree.
Did you do anything intentionally to build a church culture that not only created that place of friendship and community for believers, but also was aware that, hey, we've got a city here we want to reach and touch with the gospel, and we want to get connected and have a missional heart? Was there one thing that you intentionally did in your culture to kind of make sure you had that missional heartbeat as well as that community of friendship in the church?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I think that was a real form. Like I said, that culture of friendship at the heart of who we were was a real formational piece, and almost leaning out of that. Like Lucy had a kind of a vision, a word from God at the beginning of our journey, where essentially she pitched it out being on a tube and kind of people sitting next to each other all blindfolded on that train carriage, and somebody takes off their blindfold, and one by one you kind of remove, as they see everybody else with a blindfold, they start removing it from one another. And so that out of that came this core value for us: side by side, one by one. That's how we were going to reach the city of London. And so almost not having to try something else, but friendship as the core, it becomes that missional piece, because you're reaching a city not by throwing 100,000 pounds at a mass marketing campaign, but you are side by side, one by one, reaching friends, colleagues, family. And so who we are as a church, who we are as people, I think we've been quite intentional to say, your spiritual life is not just the 2 hours on a Sunday, or the 2 hours on a Wednesday night when you're at your small group, or your 30 minutes that you might get in the morning as a devotion, but your spiritual life is your life. 24/7, you are a follower of Jesus. And so creating that distinction that everything that you do is and represents Jesus allows that missional thing to come out of exactly who you are. And for Lucy and I, obviously, before we were pastors, I worked in the corporate environment for a decade before that, and you're still an influence and a minister in that space. And I think that's learning some lessons there, and you become a friend to somebody before that's the doorway in. So we will transform our cities and our communities one friendship at a time. And so I don't think you need to overcomplicate it too much. Is that when you become people of love. Jesus says, how would they know that you are my disciples? By the way you love one another.
Literally.
He's not talking to the people outside the church, he's talking to the people in the church. So as we love one another, as we build that foundation of love and friendship within the church, that's when we become salt, that's when we become light, that's when we become the city on a hill. So I think that it all interlinks and combines.
I love that. Side by side, one by one. And pastors, church leaders, when you're building a healthy church culture, you will fail unless you've got this one key trait. And in this video that's up next, I want you to check out the key trait that if you don't have this, I think you'll actually fail in building a healthy church culture. Phil, thanks so much for being with us today. This has been so helpful.
Pleasure. Thanks, John.